In lieu of the story of all ages, I'd like to tell a personal tale about this bullet. I have told this story before, but the advantage of working with a mostly older crowd is people don't remember these things. Okay, this is my father. I think he brought it back from World War II. He'd carry it in his jacket pocket, big thing, but he would carry it around. He never told me the story about it, but he had a little printing shop just very close to Hollywood Boulevard, and I would spend days there in my youth, and we would sometimes walk up to the Hollywood Boulevard for lunch or something. And this is a very fundamentalist family, so if there was a street preacher, we would stop and listen, actually a long time, and he'd put some money in the hat and so forth. This day, there was a very, very energetic street preacher with a rather large Bible, small person, big book, and he is gesturing a great deal while making his points. And at one point, he swung his arm, and that big Bible slipped out of his fingers and flew across and hit my father right in the chest. And if it weren't for that bullet, that Bible would have killed my father on the spot. Okay, that's an old joke. Didn't happen. I got the bullet at a souvenir shop. He didn't have one in his pocket. Basically, to be invited to tell stories is to sort of let somebody get up here and misbehave, which is what you're in for. Okay, the second story I've also told here before, but I make the same provision for it. This is the one about when Mrs. Astor wanted to go on vacation. She called her travel agent, Charles, I want to go to the Himalayas this year. I want to see the guru. Oh, Cordelia, I don't think you would enjoy that trip. Listen, I have been your travel agent for many years. Let me put you into that nice place in the Bahamas, or the one in the south of France that you enjoyed so much last. Charles, I want to see the guru. Book it. And so he did, and he was trying to warn her on the phone, listen, it's a long flight, and you know that, but that's just the easy part to get to Delhi. Then there's a short flight on a very questionable local airline, and then there's some kind of a train ride, but I think people actually bring their animals onto that train. There's some kind of a bus, then I don't know what happens after that, a cart or something, and the last part's hiking. Listen, Charles, right, okay, so he sets it up, and she gets to Delhi just fine. That little plane is a little dicey, and the train is a mess. The bus is some old recycled school bus, and it had goats on top of it. The last part, well, it's kind of a Jeep of some kind because there's all kinds of mud. Then there's a yak cart, still mud, so she's out there helping push this. Well, she's hoping it's mud. Anyway, she's pushing like crazy. Then a good deal of hiking, and they get there. It's some cave way back in the hills, and there's long lines of seekers. She gets in line, and there are attendants coming along the line. We have many seekers today. You can only have 3 words with the master. Only 3 words. Yes, fine. And this flies, and she's waiting and going up there. Gets a little closer. She can hear some chanting coming out of the cave. She gets a little closer, some smoke, and still again the chanting. Finally, she gets in the cave, and one of the seekers comes over. Remember, only 3 words. Fine, just let me. And then she sees the master up there, all kind of folded up like a pretzel with his eyes rolled back, and all the others chanting and meditating, and the candles. Finally, Mrs. Astor gets her moment. She gets up to the guru and leans over and says, Reggie, come home.
No fair. Yeah, don't follow an animal, a child, or Jonathan. So each week we take an offering during our worship service to make a community expression of thanks for the blessings and abundance of our lives. And Jan Ross, we're doing a half basket. It wasn't announced, I'm sorry, in the order of service. It is Love Your Neighbor Weekend. And Jan Ross will tell us about that. It's harder and harder, doesn't it?
Okay. I'm Jan Ross from our Social Justice Ministry, And I'm here to talk to you about our half basket for today. It will go to the Love Your Neighbor weekend, which is being sponsored by the Interfaith Sanctuary Alliance. Many of you will remember that we have contributed to a few other projects of the Interfaith Sanctuary Alliance, like DACA fees, sheltering immigrants in Tijuana, and families who need help here. It's made up of other faith communities throughout the Santa Barbara Goleta area, all working together. They are supporting getting legal help, food and shelter for immigrants, and employment that helps people be self-sufficient. They also assist those folks who are legally seeking refuge from very difficult situations in their own home areas. This includes the very vulnerable LGBTQ population who are being persecuted in their home countries. A few years ago, the Interfaith Sanctuary Alliance began to sponsor a once-a-year weekend to highlight being kind and helpful and to welcoming immigrants into our community. We've participated in these Love Your Neighbor weekends for some years now. This year, there will be immigrant-themed services at many of our fellow congregations throughout the area between April 27th and the 30th. Also, there'll be a media campaign for those people who are socially adept, with opportunities to post welcoming or action messages on hashtag #LoveYourNeighborSB. And finally, there will be an interfaith vigil on May 4th, 5:30 to 6:30 at De La Guerra Plaza, with speakers and a call to action in solidarity with our immigrant neighbors. Watch the Acorn to confirm ways to participate in these activities. The ISA is also addressing the needs of Afghanistan and the Ukraine and helping with basic humanitarian aid and education about people from these countries as well. It is a joy to participate with other faith-based communities to do this work. Please join me in contributing to this very important cause, welcoming our neighbors. Thank you.
Thank you, Jan, and thank you for all the work that you do to help others in our community and in the world. So there are a number of ways that you can make your contributions this morning. Our greeters will pass the baskets. There will be a live link posted for people at home on Zoom. You can go to our website and get the Zoom link there. You can mail a check to 820 North Fairview. And the nice thing about going home and doing this with the link on our website is you can make your donation separately. So there's one for pledge and one for donation. So that's a really nice way to be able to do that if you can't do it here in the sanctuary. So we will now take our offering, our half basket offering. What are they doing? These gifts you share are most gratefully received. So let us pause now and take a moment to reflect upon the joys or sorrows that we bring with us today. We become more deeply connected to each other when we can share with each other those things that we carry in our hearts. Our pastoral care associate today is Wilma Seeley, and she will collect any cards that you've filled out, so just hold them up for her to see. And those in our Zoom family, the chat feature will be enabled now, I hope. So if you have something you'd like to share, you can type that in the chat feature, and I will read them aloud here. During a moment of silent reflection, we'll light this first candle to bring the light of hope and love to all who suffer. Eileen Chambers has a joy to share. Ian, my grandnephew's spirit is better. He went on a trip with his father out of state to see professional basketball games instead of staying in bed in his room. Sounds like a teenager. Susan Braden shares, remembering Freda Spirka, a caring doula and prenatal exercise and yoga instructor who passed away from cancer a few weeks ago. She was an amazing woman, and I believe Michael helped with her memorial service here yesterday. Is that right, Michael? Yeah. Megan Moyer, a joy. My newest grandson, Benson, was born on March 31st. Congratulations. He weighed in at 7.6 pounds and was born in a tub on an outdoor deck in the jungles of Dominica, Costa Rica. You can bet she's going to go visit soon. Well, will you bring back pictures? Of the tub? Jan Ross. Healing thoughts for my little grandnephew, Silas, 6 weeks old, who's being operated on this week for an eye problem, which is making him blind at the moment. Oh, the doctors hope it will give him some vision. Yeah, I'll pray along with you. I'm trying to see if there's anything in Zoom, and I'm seeing nothing. So let us light these remaining candles for the joys and sorrows unspoken. All are invited to say aloud the names you're holding in your heart so that they may benefit from the kind intentions of our community. I practice being clumsy.
Make yourself comfortable for a moment of meditation. Close your eyes and relax and think of something funny. Think of an amusing time, maybe at your own expense or maybe just something silly that happened in your life. Be on that focus for just this time together. Once upon a time, there was a fellow who collected classic cars. He had quite an astounding collection, a big garage, but there was a certain model he really, really wanted, 1953 Mercury. He'd wanted this for a long time. He located one across the country, bought it sight unseen, heard it was in good shape, a 1953 Mercury, the Mercury of his dreams. It gets shipped out and arrives, but he's horribly disappointed. When he looks at the Mercury, it's all full of tuna. Now that joke is built on something having a double meaning. The first two little stories I told had to do with incongruity. They took some turn toward the end. I actually read a little bit about what makes jokes work, and when I try to find a joke, I get on the internet, I go through hundreds to find one that I haven't heard a million times and that maybe has still a little bit of surprise. The point is surprise. And that's the value of humor, is that it gets us off track a little bit. We are organized people. We like to know what we're doing and where we're going. And our lives, if we don't watch out, can get too orderly. And then humor comes in and throws it all off. And I think of it as parallel to the Unitarian experience. In Britain, the Unitarians, it says right on every order of service and building, what is the term they use? A non-conforming tradition. That's what they call it, non-conforming, which is to say not Church of England, not Catholic, something else. They don't know quite where to put us. We don't know quite where to put us. But I think it's useful if our minds are sometimes non-conforming, where we aren't quite following the rules. We had a slide up at the beginning of the service of Mardi Gras, and that's a variation on the old medieval French festival, the Feast of Fools. And the jester who's put up on the throne is a humble member of the community, the fool. It's not necessarily a person who's dim-witted or something. It's just a modest person of modest means who is made king or bishop. It was originally a more religiously oriented festival, later became the king, the bishop. And the bishop is out serving cookies or something, because there's essentially a reversal. And then the next day, the bishop has the fancy clothes back on and is back in the job, and the fool is back at his store clerk job, or whatever it is he does of ordinary life. It is useful to reverse things sometimes. Strangely, that does not shake the foundations of the order. That actually affirms that we accept somebody being in charge, but we also accept it's just a regular human being in fancy clothes. It isn't something really that different from us. The fool could be the bishop for a day. They help us, jokes help us get some of the rigidity out, get over ourselves, escape from some of our traps. I grew up, as I mentioned earlier, fundamentalist, strong on certainty, had the right answers. Now I even wonder if I have the right questions. You know, that certainty has been undermined by life experience, and I'm happy about that, but it was sort of comforting in a way to know you were on the right path, to be reminded of it constantly, and always have the right answer and the right group to blame if anything ever went wrong. It was so orderly. It was deadly, and I was ready to get out as soon as I could. Man walks into a psychiatrist and says, "I'm having these strange dreams, doctor. Sometimes I think I'm a TP. Sometimes I think I'm a wigwam." And the doctor says, "Well, that one's easy. You're 2 tenths." I didn't say they were good jokes. Receptionist walks into the psychiatrist's consulting room and says, "Doctor, there's an invisible man out in the waiting room. Tell him I can't see him." Okay, these are just puns. And now puns tells us that language itself is an unreliable narrator, that it has multiple meanings. And here's the source of great conflict between people, because sometimes they think they know what they've said. They think they've said it clearly, and it means something entirely different to the receiver. Remember the game we played as kids, telephone, and something would go around the circle. It would be garbled by the time it went through 10 people. Guy goes into a psychiatrist and says, "I'm dead." "You're dead? You just walked in here. You're not dead. You mean you're depressed? You mean you're in despair?" "I'm dead. I'm a dead man." He sits down. And the psychiatrist is thinking what to do with this. This is ridiculous. Well, let me ask you one thing. Can dead men bleed? No. Well, the psychiatrist happens to have a pin on the desk. He reaches over and pokes the guy's hand, and a little drop of blood appears. The man stares at it. What do you know? Dead men do bleed. Now that's a joke about being stubborn, okay? About being so attached to the certainty that you can have evidence right in front of you and it's not going to sway you. Jokes can, if we're receptive, bridge some of the polarities, bridge the this or that, black and white, good or bad. We need, if we can, to live in a kind of creative tension. Between black and white, there are shades of gray. There's a vast spectrum there. I have a friend that prefers to say all the colors of the rainbow. Many religious traditions talk about the middle way, the third path. Get away from the number two. That's usually right, wrong, us, them, sacred, or ordinary. Get to the place where these things mingle and life gets interesting. Besides, that's where life is really taking place. Joseph Campbell and all the other great theorists of initiation took us to the place that is betwixt and between. That's why I chose that chalice lighting reading this morning. The middle way, the vast spectrum between this or that. President Franklin Roosevelt was meeting with someone, and Eleanor Roosevelt happened to be there. It was a meeting, he had a home office, and he listens to this person and says, you're absolutely right about that. And the very next appointment was another person concerned about the same issue who gave the opposite viewpoint and the opposite advice. And FDR looked at him and said, you're absolutely right about that. And his wife, Eleanor Roosevelt, was overhearing this, and she didn't usually chide him during office hours, but she came in and says, Franklin, you just agreed with two people who said opposite things. And he looked at her and said, you're absolutely right about that. Real life is ambiguity. Real life is shades of gray, is complexity, a lot of points of view to choose from. And maybe there is some truth in a whole lot of them. And that's not tidy. Tidiness is the enemy. Jokes are very close to the wisdom stories that are told in some tradition. There's one group I like, the Nasrudin stories. They're from Persia or Turkey, it depends, because everybody claims that they're wonderful stories and they're retold in that part of the world. In this story, a beggar was given a piece of bread, but nothing to put on it, and he had no money at all. He has a piece of bread, and that's going to be all he eats for this day and maybe the next. And he's trying to think of some way to make it a little bit better. And he goes to the cafe, the inn, and begs for a little something to put on it. No, go away. So he notices the way around back, there's nobody watching, and he sneaks back into the kitchen and holds the bread over the pot of soup that is cooking, hoping to get a little flavor, a little something from the steam. And the innkeeper comes back there. You're stealing from me. I took nothing. I just held my bread. That's mine. And he takes him to, there's a little village court there, and a justice of the peace or somebody that solves small problems in the town there. And that day, the judge happens to be Nasrudin, this famous figure that keeps coming around. So he hears the innkeeper's complaint and the beggar's explanation. He feels he took nothing. And he speaks to the innkeeper and says, you demand payment for the smell of your soup. Yes, it belongs to me, and he took it without my permission. Nasrudin thinks of this for a moment. He says, I will pay you myself. And he takes coins out of his pocket and jangles them a little. He says, there, I will pay for the smell of soup with the sound of money. It's not a hilarious joke. It's a little story that makes a point, but jokes work like that often. Some are just silliness, but some are getting at something, and they're getting at our rigidity. That innkeeper was sure he was right, and you can sort of follow his logic. That is, it's not an incoherent logic. The other point of view makes sense even to the person that's disagreeing with it sometimes, but it's just ridiculous. We need mind-blowing experiences. I'm getting a little too old for psychedelics, but I can still tell jokes. There's a stage, it's called the hardening of the categories. You need to find ways to slip free of yourself. We live in paradise where where no one's unhappy ever, and everything is easy, always, and our needs are always fulfilled, or should be. And if that doesn't happen, we need to figure out who's to blame and get them to stop. Um, a little summary, we have to forgive ourselves every day for our failure. That is the failure to wrestle reality into alignment with our wishful thinking. Guy goes into the confessional box. This is a Catholic joke. I do like Catholic jokes. After being away from church for a long time, goes in a little space there and notices that it kind of opens out in the back. He wasn't remembering that. And there's more space, and there's a full bar back there, really high-end wine there, Guinness on tap, cigars, liqueur chocolates, and over on this side, there's a whole wall of the latest video games. Just then the priest comes in, and the man says, "This is really remarkable. This is a lot better than I remember from before." And the priest says, "Get out of here, you bum, you're on my side." Now, it's funnier if you used to be Catholic, but okay. Now, Catholic jokes, like a lot of jokes, are teasing authority. There's this awesome respect, and this ritual, the taking of confession, has a mystery to it, and clergy has a mystery, and it's kind of poking around back there. What's really going on? And you get you get to drink better stuff than I do, don't you? That part's probably true. These are irreverent jokes. And that's back to the idea of the fool, some of these images coming up, you see just various kinds of frivolity and festivity, but the challenging of authority is good for us. It doesn't mean that we are necessarily shaking up the social order, although that needs help from time to time. It's shaking up our own internal order. We need the deliverance from complacency. So I like aging jokes because I'm close to that. They ring true. There's the old guy who says, you used to be able to go into the store and buy groceries for the whole week for $5. You can't do that anymore these days. They got those little security cameras up in the corners of the room there. There's a lot of jokes about thieves, and there's a lot of old legends and folk tales about thieves, and they're sort of wily and even admired, even though they're breaking rules. Now, Joseph Campbell interpreted those stories as encouragement to us, not to steal from stores, not any of that, but to steal energy back from our own investment in old ideas that might not work for us anymore, to steal our own lives back from complacency and conformity, obligations that don't work for us anymore. And you will feel like a thief, and you will be punished, probably not with lashes, more with looks and gossip. But when you're out of line, you hear about it and it hurts, and you will feel guilty, and you will feel like you've done something wrong when in fact you have done something right. You have stolen in a good cause. We all get to play Robin Hood. Have you ever been guilty of the little bit of vanity of looking at others your own age and say, yeah, but I don't look that old? A woman of a certain age told a story about sitting in the waiting room for her first appointment with a new dentist. She noticed the degree on the wall that had his full name on it. And she remembered a tall, handsome, dark-haired boy with the same name that she had been in her high school class with. She had had a bit of a crush on him. She's wondering, is this Dennis by any chance? But then she's ushered in, and she quickly throws away those thoughts. This guy is balding, gray-haired, wrinkled, way, way too old to have been her classmate. And he's checking out her teeth, and she gets a moment to talk and goes ahead and asks, did you go to the local high school? Yes, he did, with some pride. And when did you graduate? He says, 1977. Why do you ask? You were in my class. And he looks at her closely, clearly racking his memory. And as she tells this story, her voice gets a little tense. She says, then that bald, wrinkled, gray-haired fossil had the nerve to ask, what did you teach? I've made a little progress in my own aging. I've decided I don't mind getting old. It's got good moments. What I mind is looking old and feeling tired rather often. Okay, I finally got through my midlife crisis. I'm back to my regular crisis. Ellen DeGeneres talks about her grandmother who decided as she got older, I think she was about 75, she said, I'm going to exercise more. I've heard that gives me a better chance at being vital in my old age. So she's going to walk for 5 miles a day. And Ellen said, you know, that was several years ago. At this point, we have no idea where she is. Life isn't about the number of breaths we take. It's about the moments that take our breath away. Jokes sometimes deal with heartbreak. They really sometimes are a way to look at something that's very, very, very difficult. Ralph Waldo Emerson, a great Unitarian minister, recounted the time when a man went to a doctor. Doctor, I'm depressed, the man said. Life is harsh, unforgiving, cruel. The doctor lights up because he has an idea. The treatment comes to mind, and it's fairly simple. Listen, he says to the patient, the great clown Carlini is performing in town here tonight. Go see him. He can cheer anybody up. He's terrific. And the man looks at him, and tears start coming from his eyes. He says, Doctor, I am Carlini. I heard this joke, and somebody was playing with it. The joke is a meme. It goes around, and different names for the comedian, and it's been apparently going around for hundreds of years. It was around before Emerson wrote a little version of it. And the version I liked best was when the doctor went to the clown, and he said, you know, I was hoping you could cheer me up. And the clown says, well, you should go see a doctor. And the doctor says, but I am a doctor. We get in that, and what do you do? Okay, I love marriage counseling jokes. The guy goes into the marriage counselor, and the therapist says, well, what's the problem? And of course, it starts like this. Well, my wife needs help. This is how marriage counseling sessions. I've got a problem here over there. Okay, my wife needs help. Every night she's roaming from one bar to another. This really has to stop. And the counselor says, do you think she might be an alcoholic? Oh, no, she's looking for me. Scenes from a marriage. We're out on a deck. There's a lovely view, a couple at a table. It's kind of evening, and the wife's sipping a glass of wine. Suddenly she says, I love you so much, I don't know how I could live without you. And the husband says, oh, that's lovely. Is that you talking, or is that the wine? Oh, it's me, dear, talking to the wine. My definition of romantic love, which I do share when I do couple work, is finding someone who can put up with you. Usually people are keenly aware of what they're putting up with, and they just somehow vanish in the equation. It's really useful to remind ourselves, you know, that person's also putting up with me. That's a challenge. I'm not sure I could put up with me. My little exercise for couples is, usually they have a little list of crimes, their complaints, the blames, you know, they're fairly tangible. I can scribble them down quickly. And then I say, okay, I want to take a moment, a little piece of paper here. I want you to write down the good qualities this person had when you first met them. What it was that you fell in love with? What made this deal? What made this work? And they'll write some things down. And I will take the little pieces of paper, and I've got the list of crimes that I have scribbled down quickly. And I will find 2 or 3 items that matches. It's the same thing. I wanted security. I grew up with food insecurity. And your complaint is that he works too much, that he's kind of too driven, he's a bit tense. Do you realize that is the same thing? That's how you get food security. You work hard. So, and you know, it's not like that can go away. If the good part went away, the part you wanted will go away too. It's one thing. It's not really 2 things at all. Okay, we're in an airplane. There are only 3 passengers, relatively small plane, but there's a pilot and a first officer, but there's only 3 passengers, a professor, a priest, and a surfer dude. And then the crew, both of them, walk toward us with parachutes on. They say, there's a problem with the plane, sorry to mention it. There are a couple of parachutes there, and with that they jump out. We have 3 people, 2 parachutes. The professor stands up and says, I'm one of the leading people in my field. I'm doing cutting edge research. It would be a terrible loss to humanity if I died. He grabs a parachute, jumps out. And the 2 remaining passengers look at each other, and the priest says, I'm old, young man. I've had a full life. I'm good with my God. you take the last parachute. And the surfer interrupts him, says, hey, no worries, dude. The smartest man in the world just jumped out of the plane with my backpack. That one goes over well with my students. Yeah, they like that one. And that's puncturing authority. Okay, that's taking, Groucho Marx, his main character on the vaudeville stage before he got into the movies was playing the professor. He'd come out with the mortarboard, and there's something, first of all, I'm a professor, it's inherently ridiculous that somebody stands up and holds forth and acts like they know more than other people. And professors do know more because they read the book last week and you don't get to read it until next week. The edge is very, very small. And the further along you go in graduate school, there might not be any edge at all. Now, I know I've gone on a while. Some people do consider my sermons to be hostage situations. I just want to say a little medical advice. If this sermon lasts more than 4 hours, call your doctor. Okay, a big contractor is worried about his project, is not quite on time, there's losing some money. He hires an industrial psychologist to go out, interview the workers, see what's going on. It's a brick building, you have the bricklayers working along. He walks up to the first worker there, and he says, well, what are you making here? What am I making? Minimum wage. And it could be better. I work pretty hard here, it's not much money. And he walks on to the next worker, what are you making? Who's making is the guy who's got this contract. He's making on the bricks, he's making on our labor, he's making on the cement, he's making on everything. Walks on the third worker. What are you making? I'm making a cathedral. I'm making something here that's going to make the world better, lift the spirit, make people joyous. They had to fire that guy. He was supposed to be building a garage. I don't know if you've noticed how many of my jokes are religious. My ex-wife used to say being married to me is like having to go to church every day of her life. I'm interested in religious things, and it's interesting as the certainty of the theology of my childhood slipped away, I didn't lose interest. I became more fascinated with world traditions and magical stories and all of it. Okay, the guy's walking along a beach. I got this one from Ron Cronenberg here, so he's already smiling. He knows the joke. Walks along the beach and he stubs his toe on something, and he looks, and there's some old bottle there. He picks it up. It's actually a lamp. He wipes it off, and sure enough, a genie pops out. This part of the joke is familiar, but there's slight variations on how it ends. You have 3 wishes. Oh, yeah, I wish I could believe in genies. Oh, wow, I do believe in genies. I wish the whole world could believe in genies. And somehow he knew that everybody in the world could suddenly believe in genies. Now he's used up 2 wishes, and he's thinking, I'm gonna be very careful now. I'm gonna be very careful. Okay. I want $10 million in gym bags right here at my feet. He's very specific, exactly. Nothing. No gym bags. And he kind of looks at the genie, and genie can tell he's disappointed. He says, just because you believe in me doesn't mean I'm real. Yeah, that's a religious joke too, isn't it? Yeah, okay. Hey, if you can't laugh at yourself, make fun of other people. What can I tell you? That's a joke. Here's my last little story, and not so much a joke. It's a reference to this slide that's got up. This is a slide of the stained glass window. I can't see it from here. Okay, that's in Notre Dame Cathedral in Paris. And it's the depiction of an old French legend that once you'll need to translate, there's theological language in here, but you can make it your own. In a modest monastery, they had decided to celebrate the Holy Mother through their creativity, and all the monks made things. They made stained glass windows, they made hymns, they made beautiful paintings, but there was one monk that didn't have this kind of talent. He wasn't an artist. He before becoming a monk, he'd worked in street performers situations, carnivals, very humble things. He couldn't do those things. So in the evening, he snuck into the chapel and he brought out his balls and did his juggling, the thing he did for coins on the street. And sometimes he'd stand on a hand and juggle. He could do some good tricks. And the other monks saw what was going on, and they came and started murmuring that there should be some kind of punishment for this blasphemy. But just then they noticed that the statue of the Virgin Mary that he was performing for had come to life and came over and blessed the performer. All you can do is bring what you can bring. If you bring tricks, who knows? Maybe the angels will be pleased. I don't know how to translate this. Maybe we make the statue Susan B. Anthony. I'm not sure. Somehow, you get the idea, though. To wrap up, actually doing this hasn't been nearly as bad as I feared, but that's only because I am riddled with fear. In endeavors like this, I trust the old motto, if at first you don't succeed, hide all evidence that you ever tried. Well, while I was preparing these remarks, it did cross my mind that my friends here at Live Oak were going to let me get up and tell a bunch of my favorite jokes. Now I ask you, how good can life get?